Monica Evans had always believed in the power of resilience. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, she was no stranger to hard work. Her parents, Clarence and Ruby Evans, instilled in her a strong work ethic from an early age. Her father worked long hours as a mechanic, while her mother ran a small home-based catering business, waking up before dawn to prepare meals for local events. Though they didn't have much in terms of material wealth, they were rich in determination, faith, and the belief that education was the key to a better future. Monica's journey to becoming the CEO of Sterling Bank was anything but easy. As a young girl, she excelled in mathematics, often helping her mother balance the books for her catering business. By the time she was in high school, she had developed a keen interest in finance, fascinated by the way money moved and how businesses grew. Despite her talent, counselors at her school subtly encouraged her to pursue more practical careers rather than finance or banking, a suggestion she quietly dismissed. Determined to prove herself, Monica enrolled at Howard University, a prestigious HBCU in Washington, D.C., where she majored in finance. She worked multiple part-time jobs to support herself, often spending late nights studying in the library while working early morning shifts at a local coffee shop. Her dedication paid off when she landed an internship at Sterling Bank during her junior year. She started as an entry-level teller, a position many saw as a temporary step, but for Monica, it was an opportunity to learn the industry from the ground up. For the next 25 years, Monica climbed the corporate ladder, breaking barriers at every turn. She moved from teller to loan officer, then to branch manager, and later became a regional director overseeing dozens of branches across the Southeast. Along the way, she earned her MBA from Harvard Business School, often balancing coursework with late-night strategy meetings at the bank. Her ability to turn around struggling branches earned her a reputation as a problem solver, someone who didn't just talk about change, she made it happen. But her rise to the top wasn't without resistance. When the previous CEO of Sterling Bank announced his retirement, Monica was the most qualified candidate. Yet, behind closed doors, concerns were raised, not about her skills or experience, but about whether clients and stakeholders would be comfortable with a black woman leading the institution. Despite the skepticism, Monica's unwavering integrity and results-driven leadership spoke louder than any bias. When she was named CEO 3 months ago, she made one thing clear in her acceptance speech. At Sterling Bank, we don't just serve accounts, we serve people. And every person, regardless of their background, deserves respect, dignity, and equal access to financial opportunities. Little did she know that her commitment to fairness would soon be tested, not in a boardroom, but on the front lines, inside one of her own bank branches. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when Monica Evans, dressed in a simple navy hoodie and dark slacks, walked into Sterling Bank's central branch. She had been CEO for only 3 months, but today, she wasn't here in her official capacity. She was here as a regular customer, just another face in the crowd. Her goal was simple: to see firsthand how everyday clients were treated. Taking a seat in the waiting area, Monica observed the interactions around her. A well-dressed middle-aged white man approached the counter and was immediately greeted with a warm smile from the teller. His transaction was completed in under 2 minutes. A younger white woman, likely in her mid-30s, walked up next, chatting casually with the teller about her weekend before withdrawing a sizable amount with no issues. Then, Monica stepped up to the counter. The moment she handed over her withdrawal slip, requesting $125,000, she felt the atmosphere shift. The young teller, Karen Lewis, took one look at the amount and hesitated, her smile fading. She glanced at Monica's Georgia driver's license, then at her again, as if trying to decide whether they truly matched. "1 moment, please," Karen said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been with the previous customers. Karen leaned toward her colleague, David Carter, a senior teller, and whispered something. David's eyes flicked toward Monica before he nodded, stepping behind Karen and positioning himself as if to block Monica's view. "Is there a problem?" Monica asked, her voice calm but firm. "It's just a security measure," David said, his voice carrying through the lobby. Customers and staff turned to look. Behind her, Monica could hear the hushed whispers. A woman in line clutched her purse a little tighter. A man sighed loudly, clearly impatient. The scrutiny was immediate and familiar, the quiet but unmistakable discomfort that came when people assumed she didn't belong. Moments later, Amanda Hill, the branch manager, strode toward the counter, exuding the confidence of someone who had never been questioned in her own authority. She barely glanced at Monica's ID before pushing the withdrawal slip back across the counter. "I'm sorry, but we can't just hand out large sums of cash without proper verification," Amanda said, her voice dripping with condescension. Monica met her gaze. "I've provided all the required identification. My funds are in this account. What further verification do you need?" Amanda folded her arms. "You need to understand, we have to be extra cautious with these kinds of transactions. It's for your protection." "These kinds of transactions?" Monica repeated. "What exactly do you mean by that?" David cleared his throat. "Let's just say we've had unusual activity on accounts like these." The implication hung in the air. The staff had made their judgment. A black woman in casual clothing requesting a six-figure withdrawal must be involved in something suspicious. Monica felt the weight of their assumptions. She had encountered bias before, but this was different. This wasn't a private boardroom discussion or a subtle slight in a corporate meeting. This was open, unapologetic discrimination in full view of customers and employees. And none of them had any idea who she really was. Monica Evans had always prided herself on her patience. Years in the financial industry had taught her the importance of composure, especially in moments of tension. But as she stood at the counter of Sterling Bank's Central Branch, it became painfully clear that patience alone would not change the reality of what was happening. The atmosphere had shifted. Conversations hushed, and eyes darted toward her, some filled with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. What should have been a routine transaction had now turned into a spectacle. Karen Lewis, the teller, still held Monica's bank card and withdrawal slip, hesitating as if unsure of her next move. Instead of processing the request, she turned to David Carter, the senior teller, for direction. David, a man in his early 40s with years of experience, walked over with an air of authority, scanning Monica from head to toe. "Miss Evans, was it?" he asked, his tone polite but laced with suspicion. "That's correct," Monica replied evenly. David studied the withdrawal slip, then glanced back at Monica. "This is quite a large sum," he said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Monica remained firm. "Yes, it is. But it's well within the withdrawal limit for my account type." Instead of responding, David turned to whisper something to Lisa Morgan, another teller nearby. Lisa, a woman in her early 30s, smirked slightly and shook her head. "I'll need to get approval for this," David announced, though approval was never required for withdrawals within policy limits. He disappeared into the back office, leaving Monica standing there as if she were an inconvenience, a disruption to the bank's smooth operations. A few minutes later, Amanda Hill, the branch manager, returned, exuding authority. She barely looked at Monica before addressing Karen. "What seems to be the issue here?" "She's trying to withdraw $125,000, Karen said hesitantly. Amanda's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly, and then she turned to Monica with a carefully practiced smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Miss Evans, I'm afraid we can't process this request without additional verification. Large cash withdrawals require extra scrutiny." "It's just standard protocol," she said smoothly. Monica knew better. She had personally signed off on the bank's policies. No such protocol existed, at least, not for customers who fit the right profile. "I see," Monica said, keeping her voice controlled. "So, is this policy applied to everyone? Because I just watched a gentleman withdraw a substantial sum without any delays." Amanda's smile faltered. David reappeared just in time to interject. "We have to be cautious with transactions like these, especially given certain patterns we've seen." Lisa, emboldened by the growing confrontation, leaned over to another teller and whispered just loudly enough for Monica to hear. "Probably some kind of settlement. Or maybe a lawsuit payout." A chuckle rippled through the nearby employees. Monica's grip on the counter tightened slightly. She had heard these coded assumptions before, statements meant to diminish, to suggest that a black woman couldn't possibly have earned her wealth through intelligence, strategy, and years of hard work. And yet, none of them knew who she was. Amanda's voice interrupted Monica's thoughts. "Perhaps a different financial institution would be better suited to handle your needs," she suggested, her tone filled with polite dismissal. It was the final insult. The staff had made their decision. Monica didn't belong. What they didn't realize was that she owned the very bank they were trying to push her out of. The tension in the Sterling Bank Central Branch lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. The low murmur of customers, the quiet clicking of keyboards, and the distant hum of the bank's security cameras all faded into the background as Monica Evans stood firm at the counter. She had already endured enough condescension and scrutiny for simply attempting to withdraw her own money. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear that the situation was escalating. A teller hurried across the lobby and disappeared into the back offices. Moments later, Amanda Hill, the branch manager, emerged. Tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blazer and pumps that clicked sharply against the marble floor, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never had their authority questioned. Amanda scanned the room, her gaze quickly landing on Monica. Her expression was one of polite indifference, the same forced smile reserved for difficult customers she didn't particularly care to deal with. "Miss Evans, is it?" Amanda asked, tilting her head slightly as if seeing Monica for the first time. "Yes," Monica replied evenly. Amanda barely glanced at the withdrawal slip still sitting on the counter before pushing it back toward Monica with a carefully rehearsed smile. "I'm afraid we can't approve this withdrawal at this time," she said smoothly. Monica remained unfazed. "And why is that?" Amanda clasped her hands in front of her, adopting a patronizing tone. "Well, you see, large cash withdrawals require additional verification. It's a security precaution. We wouldn't want you to become a target for theft, now would we?" The way she spoke, the slight lilt in her voice, the faux concern, made it clear that this wasn't about security. It was about control. "That's interesting," Monica said, her voice measured. "Because I watched at least 2 other customers withdraw large sums with no issue." Amanda's practiced expression faltered for the briefest moment before she recovered. "We assess transactions on a case-by-case basis," she said curtly. Monica could hear a few customers shifting uncomfortably behind her. Some of them had been there long enough to witness the blatant disparity in treatment. Others pretended not to notice, choosing to stare at their phones or the decorative brochures about investment plans. David Carter, the senior teller, decided to double down. He folded his arms and smirked. "Look, Miss Evans, if you really need that much cash, maybe a check cashing service would be more appropriate." The insult landed hard. A few employees exchanged knowing glances, while another muffled a laugh. Monica took a slow breath. She had faced discrimination before. She had fought to break barriers in a world that was never built with her success in mind. But this was a challenge. Amanda leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to feign discretion but loud enough for bystanders to hear. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable taking your banking elsewhere. There are institutions that specialize in customers with unique financial needs." The message was clear: this bank isn't for you. What Amanda didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that this bank belonged to Monica Evans. Monica Evans had spent her entire career proving people wrong, proving that a black woman could rise through the ranks of corporate America, proving that competence and character mattered more than stereotypes. But today, in the very institution she led, she wasn't just being underestimated. She was being dismissed. The Sterling Bank Central Branch was quiet now. Employees had stopped their tasks to watch the standoff unfold. Customers, some pretending not to listen, stole quick glances from behind their phones. Amanda Hill, the branch manager, stood with her arms crossed, exuding confidence, convinced that she had won. "Miss Evans," Amanda said, her voice laced with condescension, "I'm going to have to ask you to conclude your business elsewhere. This branch is not able to accommodate your request." That was it. That was the moment. Monica reached into her purse, not in anger, not in frustration, but with absolute control. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The moment Amanda saw the call being placed, she smirked. Another disgruntled customer calling to complain. She had seen it before. But when Monica spoke, everything changed. "Eric, I need you at the Central Branch immediately." A hush fell over the room. David Carter, the senior teller who had smirked at her earlier, frowned slightly. He glanced at Amanda, who suddenly didn't look so sure of herself. "Yes," Monica continued into the phone, her tone calm but firm. "I'm standing in the lobby. They've denied my transaction." "Yes, that's correct." "No, they don't know who I am." A flicker of doubt crossed Amanda's face. "Wait a second," Lisa Morgan, another teller, whispered to a colleague. "Did she just say Eric? As in Eric Simmons?" Eric Simmons was the chief operating officer of Sterling Bank, the second most powerful person in the company after Monica herself. The realization began to dawn on the staff. Something was very, very wrong. Amanda took a half step back, trying to maintain her composure. "Miss Evans, there's no need to escalate." But before she could finish, the doors of the branch burst open. In strode Eric Simmons, flanked by two other senior executives. He wasn't smiling. His eyes locked onto Monica, and in that instant, Amanda knew. Her stomach dropped. Eric didn't address Amanda. He walked straight to Monica and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Madam CEO, I apologize for the unacceptable treatment you've received today. This is not how we do business." The words hit like a thunderclap. "CEO?" The reaction was immediate. A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. Some customers turned to one another in shock. Employees stood frozen in place. Amanda visibly paled. David, who had been so smug moments ago, looked as if the floor had just vanished beneath him. Lisa Morgan, who had whispered earlier, covered her mouth in horror. Everything, the sneers, the condescension, the outright rejection, had been directed at the most powerful woman in the entire company. And now, the reckoning had begun. The moment Eric Simmons addressed Monica Evans as Madam CEO, the energy inside Sterling Bank's central branch shifted dramatically. The confidence that had once radiated from Amanda Hill, the branch manager, evaporated in an instant. David Carter, the senior teller, took a step back as if distance could shield him from the reckoning that was about to unfold. Lisa Morgan, who had made the smug comment about Monica's supposed settlement, looked as if she wished she could disappear. For a few long, agonizing seconds, no one moved. The weight of their actions, of their words, their assumptions, their outright discrimination, was settling in. Monica took a slow, deliberate breath before speaking. "Eric, have you reviewed the security footage?" Eric gave a curt nod. "We have. The executive team is watching it right now." At that moment, the monitors in Sterling Bank's corporate headquarters were displaying everything, from the way Monica had been ignored in the waiting area to the dismissive smirks and whispered comments. Every insult, every double standard, every humiliation was being watched in real time by the board of directors. Amanda swallowed hard, her throat dry. I think there's been a misunderstanding." Monica turned to her, her voice unwavering. "There's no misunderstanding. You refused a transaction that was fully within policy. You questioned my legitimacy, despite my proper identification. You and your staff made assumptions about me based on nothing but appearance. Tell me, Amanda, what exactly did you think I was going to do with my own money?" Amanda opened her mouth but found no answer. "Here's what's going to happen," Monica continued. Her tone was measured, controlled, but final. She turned to Eric. "Effective immediately, Amanda Hill, David Carter, and Lisa Morgan are terminated for gross misconduct, violation of company policy, and discriminatory practices." Amanda staggered back as if she had been physically struck. "Terminated? You can't do this," David protested weakly, his face draining of color. "I can," Monica said. "And I have." Lisa let out a small gasp, tears already forming in her eyes. Monica nodded toward Thomas, the security guard who had been watching the entire ordeal unfold, clearly uncomfortable with what he had witnessed. "Thomas, please escort them to retrieve their belongings. Their access to this branch is revoked, effective immediately." Thomas straightened his posture. "Yes, ma'am." As the disgraced employees were led toward the back, whispers rippled through the lobby. A few customers nodded in approval. Others simply stared in shock, realizing they had just witnessed something rarely seen in corporate America: real, immediate accountability. Monica then turned to the remaining employees. Karen Lewis, the young teller, stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale. She had been the first to serve Monica that morning, the one who had hesitated but ultimately followed the lead of her superiors. "Karen," Monica said, her tone softer. Karen braced herself, clearly expecting to be fired next. "You have a choice," Monica continued. "You knew what was happening was wrong. You hesitated, but you stayed silent. Today was a test, not just for me, but for you. Moving forward, you will either be part of the problem or part of the solution." Karen nodded quickly, tears welling up. "I understand. I want to do better." "Good," Monica said. "You'll be placed on probation with mandatory training. But if I ever hear of this happening again, to any customer, you'll be gone. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Karen whispered. Monica turned back to Eric. "I want a full review of this branch. Every transaction, every customer complaint, every performance metric. We're not just cleaning house today, we're fixing the culture. And with that, Sterling Bank's central branch had just changed forever. The events at Sterling Bank's central branch had sent shockwaves through the company. Within hours, every senior executive, department head, and regional manager was briefed on what had happened. But for Monica Evans, firing the employees responsible wasn't enough. This wasn't just about one branch. It was about the entire culture of the bank. The very next morning, Monica convened an emergency board meeting at Sterling Bank's headquarters in Chicago. The room was silent as she played the security footage from the branch, every dismissive glance, every whispered remark, every blatant act of discrimination. Some board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others sat in stunned silence. "This," Monica said, pausing the footage on a frame showing Amanda Hill sneering at her, "is not just a few bad employees. This is a systemic failure. And it ends today." The room remained silent for a moment before Eric Simmons, the COO, spoke. "What do you propose?" Monica already had a plan. A $75 million investment in reform. That afternoon, Sterling Bank announced a comprehensive reform initiative with a $75 million investment in bias and discrimination training. Every employee, from tellers to executives, would undergo mandatory training on recognizing and preventing discrimination in customer service. This wasn't going to be a one-time seminar, it would be a continuous education program with quarterly evaluations. Customer fairness audits, independent auditors would conduct mystery shopper evaluations across all branches, assessing how different customers were treated based on race, gender, and socioeconomic status. Transparent performance metrics, a new equity score would be added to branch performance reviews. Loan approvals, account services, and transaction handling would be analyzed demographically to ensure fair treatment for all customers. Community Advisory Board, Monica established a Client Equity Advisory Board, made up of real customers, particularly those from marginalized communities, who would review policies and provide direct feedback to the bank's leadership. New oversight hotline, every Sterling Bank branch would now have a prominently displayed sign. Every customer deserves dignity, respect, and fair service. If your experience does not reflect these values, call this number. Beneath it, Monica's direct office line. Leadership accountability, any manager or employee caught engaging in discriminatory behavior would be subject to immediate termination, no warnings, no second chances. As news of the reforms spread, media outlets across the country picked up the story. Business networks praised the transparency, while social justice advocates applauded Sterling Bank for taking real action. And yet, Monica wasn't done. She personally visited multiple branches, unannounced, in different cities, watching how customers were treated. Where she saw fairness, she rewarded employees. Where she saw bias, she corrected it on the spot. For Monica Evans, this wasn't just about fixing a bank. It was about setting a new standard for the entire industry. 6 months had passed since Monica Evans had walked into Sterling Bank's central branch and exposed a culture of discrimination within her own institution. What began as a humiliating experience had become a turning point, not just for the bank, but for the entire industry. Sterling Bank had undergone a dramatic transformation. The $75 million reform initiative wasn't just a public relations move, it had fundamentally changed the way the bank operated. Customers noticed the difference. Employees noticed the difference. And most importantly, the numbers reflected the change. The results were undeniable. Customer satisfaction among minority clients rose by 42%. Loan approvals for qualified Black and Hispanic business owners increased by 38%, correcting long-standing disparities. Employee turnover among frontline staff decreased, as tellers and branch managers felt supported in creating a more inclusive environment. The customer fairness audits revealed fewer instances of biased service, and when issues arose, they were addressed swiftly. The Client Equity Advisory Board, made up of real customers who had faced discrimination, became an essential part of bank policy discussions. Their feedback directly influenced training programs, hiring practices, and service improvements. A ripple effect across the banking industry. Sterling Bank's changes didn't go unnoticed. Other financial institutions took note. Competing banks, under pressure from both the public and regulators, began implementing similar programs. At a national banking conference, Monica was invited to speak about the importance of equity in financial services. Standing before an audience of executives, she made it clear. Fairness is not optional. Respect is not a privilege, it's a right. If you are not actively working to remove bias from your institution, you are part of the problem. Her words were met with a standing ovation. A personal victory, a public mission. Despite all the success, Monica never forgot the days she had been humiliated in her own bank. She kept a printed copy of her original withdrawal slip in her office, not as a reminder of what had happened to her, but as motivation for what still needed to change. She continued visiting branches unannounced, sometimes dressed casually, sometimes in full business attire. She wanted to see, firsthand, whether employees had truly embraced the new culture or if old habits were creeping back in. One morning, she walked into a different Sterling Bank branch, dressed as she had been on that fateful day. She approached the counter, asked to make a large withdrawal, and handed over her ID. The teller, a young woman with a nervous but sincere smile, carefully verified the transaction, then said, "Thank you for banking with us, Miss Evans. Is there anything else I can do to make your experience better today?" Monica smiled. That was the change she had fought for. The world wasn't perfect, but progress was possible. And sometimes, change started with one person refusing to accept the status quo. Life often presents us with moments where we can either accept the status quo or challenge it. Monica Evans' story is a testament to the power of refusing to remain silent in the face of injustice. She could have walked away, swallowed her frustration, and accepted the humiliation. Instead, she chose to act, not with anger, but with purpose. Her experience teaches us that change starts with awareness and accountability. Many people assume discrimination is a thing of the past, yet it still exists in subtle and overt ways. Whether in a bank, a workplace, or our communities, treating others with dignity and fairness should never be optional. For those in their later years, this story is a reminder that wisdom and experience give us the ability to shape a better world for future generations. By speaking up, supporting fair policies, and mentoring younger individuals to lead with integrity, we ensure that respect and equality become the foundation of every interaction, not just ideals on paper. No one should have to prove they deserve basic respect. It's our responsibility to demand it, for ourselves and for others.